Again, my name is Jay, and I will be going through these items. On the system, if you're actually signed in, the Getting Started guides, all of them for every module is under the Getting Started menu right here. You can select whichever one pertains to you. The membership, the contribution, the fund accounting, and the payroll. There's two for payroll. There's also an accounting year-end guide and a contribution year-end guide. Those two are important for those areas as well, because when you may be starting your new year, you obviously have to move certain things or copy envelopes from one year to the next and so forth. Accounting, you have to obviously close out 1 year, so it locks the transactions down, so I recommend those being printed off as well. Okay, so what we're going to do, the first thing is to be able to go into the organization and personal settings on page 5, and you'll want to basically make sure this is set correctly, because even though most of the time this deals with the accounting side, you do want to set it correctly for the contributions, okay? So we'll go ahead and set that up. And it says go to organization, set up information. That's the screen, okay, that we're going to go to. So organization, set up information, and it's right here. So you would set your first month in their fiscal year. Some churches it might be July, others will be January. Sometimes I've seen some real odd ones, September, October, and so forth. So make sure that's set correctly. And you should be good to go at that point. And if we go back to the guide here, it basically says now you want to make sure you set your right fiscal year. That's on a different screen actually called Organization Preferences Personal. So we'll go ahead and go there. We'll close this screen, go to Organization Preferences Personal, and it looks like I'm working in 2015. I can tell you right now, if this fiscal year is incorrect when you're entering contributions, they will be wrong. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So ensure that you are in the right year before you enter any contributions, okay? Now, there are times where, you know, we may be able to do something if you've posted batches, but I would recommend highly, if you don't want to have to re-enter things, to make sure you're in the right fiscal year when you enter contributions. And I'll kind of show you some places on the screens when you're entering contributions to know if you're in the right fiscal year or not. But keep in mind, you can always go back in fiscal years. Like sometimes people have to go back and forth between fiscal years, and that's fine, provided you're in the right year when you're doing the work that you're doing. Okay, when you're done with that work and you have to go to the current year, always make sure you come back here and put it to the current year. Okay. So now we'll go back. Now in section 1.2 it talks about envelopes, and what you're doing in envelopes is you're designating your donors. Now you may not use envelope numbers, and we'll get into that, but we'll go ahead and go into the envelope section, which is where you will designate your donors. This is where you have to have membership in your database before you even get to this step. So if your membership people haven't even put in the membership, you'll want to ensure that you get that set up first, okay? So we'll go ahead and talk about that. That's under contributions and envelopes, E&V maintenance, okay? Now, in envelopes, there are the ability to add in people by household or by member, okay? And the way they're treated is a little bit different as far as reporting is concerned, okay? When you add in a household number, you will add it in, and what happens is that statement, when it comes out, will actually have the household name. So if the household name is John and Mary Smith, John and Mary Smith will print on this contribution statement. But if they're a member envelope and it's just for Mary Smith, well, guess what name's going to be on the contribution statement? It will only be Mary Smith. Well, how can you tell? The first question most people have is, how can you tell what one's a household and what one's a member? It's very simple. On all of the contribution screens that have kind of data input on them, like the contribution entry screen and this screen in particular, you can see that there's a member name column right here. Okay. If there is a member name listed as there is here for this John, that would be a member envelope. Okay. If there is no name like this one here, one right above it, there's no name, but there is a name over here, that would be a household envelope. Okay, so what's happening here, the reason John is showing up, but he's also part of the Donovan and Diane Agler-Smith household. So what's going on here is Donovan and Diane are probably the parents, and more than likely John is a child or someone that's living with them, like maybe their 20-year-old son is still living with them and he's filing his own taxes now. So he needs his own contribution statement. He cannot donate underneath his parents because he doesn't get credit for it. Okay? So this would be a perfect example of when you would have a family or a household envelope, as it is in this top, the top row, versus a member envelope in this bottom one. Okay. Now, if you have to change these numbers, for example, maybe I don't agree with this 1102 for an envelope number. Maybe he's supposed to be like 1105. Okay. Would I go under the Add Edit Household Numbers or the Add Edit Member Number button? Well, it's a member envelope, so I'm going to find it actually under the Add Edit Member Numbers area. If I go here, I will not find it. Okay. I guarantee you'll be 100% wrong every time you go there if you are trying to look for a member envelope. So I'm going to go under Member Envelope, and I'm going to look for, and I'm assuming John probably has a different last name because you'll notice that he's not in the Aglers. Okay. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to actually go over to their household and look at John, and there we go. And here is John. His last name is actually Smitherson. Okay, so I'm going to just type in SMI and take me down to the Smithersons, and there's 1102, and I want to change it to 1105. Okay, and 1105 is not taken, so therefore it can stay. Okay. Now, if I wanted to change the Agler one, since that's a household one, I'm going to go in under Add Edit Household Numbers, and I'm going to change that to that number, 9996. Okay. And now if I close this, I have the new numbers. Okay. You can change envelope numbers at any time on the system because there's internal IDs that happen. And a lot of people may think of envelope numbers as kind of the old-fashioned, but just think of them as unique identifiers. We just haven't changed the terminology around on it. They're unique identifiers for it. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to do is talk about churches that may not use envelope numbers. You'll see many households here that have a 0. And you certainly can do that. You can put a 0 next to all your donors, and that makes them show up on this screen. Okay. When you first come into envelope maintenance, if you have nobody in here, then you are not going to be able to apply donations. Okay. So for example, if I go all the way up to 2018, you'll see there is no people designated as donors out here in the year of 2018. So when I go to enter a batch, I would not be able to enter a batch at this time because there's nobody there. And envelopes are done by the fiscal year. The reason you do them by fiscal year is because you want to be able to say this person had maybe envelope number 5, the next year they might have envelope 10. Okay, so you got to keep them kind of separated. Okay, there are pros and cons of having numbers, or is the number 0, and I'll get into that when we get into the batch area. But just know that you can do it this way if you feel that you don't want to use envelope numbers. Okay. So let's go back to our guide. I think envelope numbers are covered pretty completely. Let's go to the contribution fund maintenance. Now this is where you're going to set up your funds, and I'm going to show you how to add a new fund and some other things in there. Okay. So let's go ahead and close our screens and go to contributions, fund or contribution maintenance. These are the funds that I currently have. Okay. Now, these are also done by fiscal year. Okay. So if you come in here and your fiscal year isn't right, then more than likely your fiscal year isn't set underneath your organization menu correctly, and you should go change that. Okay. When you come into the screen, you should be on the year that you're working with. Okay. Or you're going to be doing a lot of extra data entry in. Okay, now if I wanted to create a new fund, all I got to do is type in a new fund called, Pew Fund, for example, and I could click Save, and now the Pew Fund has been entered as, or can be entered against for donations. That's all there is to adding a fund. Okay, there are some fund types out here: tax deductible, taxable, and IRA contribution. Tax deductible are ones that you can actually take a tax deduction on, and most of your funds are probably going to fall under that category. However, there are taxable ones. Okay, taxable funds are things like maybe you take up a coffee fund where people put money in the coffee fund, but they also drink the coffee. As that may sound, that why would I take a tax deduction for that? There are churches that sometimes do that, but actually it is a taxable fund because you're getting a product, which is the coffee, for your donation. So it's really not a donation at that point. At least the IRS doesn't think so. So anything that's a taxable type of thing, a service, a product, or whatever, you would want to probably create a taxable fund, or not even bring it in on the contribution side. You can bring it on the accounting side. One of those things might be a rental income. I see sometimes churches like to bring rental income because they want to try to get it all in one deposit under the contribution side, but really rental income is not a tax deductible fund. Okay, the tax deductible fund is for tax deductions. So I would typically recommend rental income or things like that to be brought in on the accounting side only. If you choose the taxable fund type and you do contribution statements, let's just go to that screen real quick. The default is tax deductible, but you can also run statements on the other ones. However, here's the rub that I kind of try to talk to churches about. If you do something like rental income, okay, and you bring it in through the contribution side, to me, an auditor or someone could actually question that and say, why are you bringing it in that way? Why don't you just bring it in on a regular income on the accounting side, on the books, on the church's books, instead of on the fund books on the contribution side? To me, I like to keep things very separated. If it's a donation, a true legitimate donation, then bring it in on the contribution side. If it is not, bring it in on the accounting side. In this way, by doing that, you are removing all doubt from anybody of what's a donation and what is not a donation. Okay, the system can handle it and allow you to bring it in on a taxable kind of fund, but at the same time, I would probably do it differently if I was the administrator. Okay, but that's up to your churches. So here I created the Pew Fund, and I'm going to show you how you can enter pledges. Okay, if I enter pledges, I can then select somebody and put money against it for whatever date range I want, and the frequencies are weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, or other, and click Save. Okay, and it'll put it up here and up at the window, and then I go to my next person. Now here's the thing I want to explain is these frequencies. Okay, weekly is, how do I say this? Some of these are more accurate than others when it comes to pledging. And what I mean by that is time or dates per se, like weekly, frequencies are very inaccurate. For example, in 2012, there was actually 53 Sundays. So the weekly is going to count how many Sundays. Well, if you pledge $10, most people think that there's only 52 weeks in the year. However, they are wrong. Okay, I think it's every 4 or 5 years, I forget the frequency, that we end up with actually 53 Sundays. Okay, so they would actually be responsible for $530 if it was one of those years. So you got to kind of keep that in mind when you're doing pledging. Okay, are they pledging a total and amount, or are they pledging weekly no matter how many weeks are in the year? Same way with, I believe it's quarterly. No, it's actually weekly is the only one. The month one is more accurate, obviously, because 12 months never changes. There is always 12 months, okay? Quarterly, there is always 3 months to a quarter, okay? And then annual or other, I will let you know that when you put a pledge in for annual or other, that whole pledge is due on any day within a date range. So if I ran a statement, if I put an amount in here for $50 for the whole year, if I ran a contribution statement from January 1st to January 1st of the same year, okay, that pledge in its entirety is due, okay? The reason is because annual does not break down. You said you were going to pay $50 annually, and that means on any day that you run a statement or any report that has a pledge on it, means it will show up for any one of those days within that date range, okay? So just keep that in mind when you're doing pledging, okay? You can also view the activity of a fund. So for example, if I click on general fund that has some activity, you can see the posted and the pledged amount. The view activity is only the posted amounts, okay? And that's what happened. There's a cash receipt envelope out here that can be used, and when you don't know where the money came from, but other than that, it should belong to somebody, okay? And then whenever you have a question on someone's statement, most of the time there is how do I say this, when you have a problem with a statement, one of the first things that I will do as a technician when you call me and you can't figure it out is I actually come to this window, I find the person's name like Sid Adler, right? Because most of the time you know who it is. I'm going to then go to the right once I find the transaction that you say is wrong, and I'm going to find this journal number, okay? That journal number is the posting journal, okay? And what I tell people is that posting journal is basically the law on the system. If it's in there, it gets posted. If it's in there incorrectly, it still gets posted, but it's incorrect. So for example, someone says something didn't show up on someone's statement. And here's a good example. Right here, say I ran a statement for 2015, okay, for the whole year. Sid Adler calls up and says, why isn't this one here due or is on my statement? Well, because you got credit for that back in 2014, okay? Even though you applied money to the 2015 general fund, you paid it in 2014. So this will not be on a 2015 statement, okay? And it shouldn't be. He got credit for it already in 2014. So when someone calls up and asks those type of questions, this is kind of the first thing I go to, and I say, oh, the reason is because your date given is incorrect. If he did actually give it in 2015, then you would have to change this date. Okay. And only you guys can answer that. I wouldn't be able to. Okay. Now you can modify a fund anytime you want. You can say, say general fund and put 101 behind it if you want, or you can put numbers in front of it, and it modifies it for the entire system. Okay. So that's no problem. Okay. Now, let me go into the guide here again. We talked about the funds. Now we're going to drop down into contribution batches, which makes kind of sense because we have the funds and we have the envelopes. I always tell people you have to know where the money's coming from, which are the people or the envelopes. And you have to know where the money's going to, and that's the funds. Okay, you have those two things. Now you can do a batch. Okay, so you enter the batch by going to contribution batch enter, and here is where you want to make sure you're always right on the fiscal year. Remember I told you earlier on, you can always tell what fiscal year you're in. If this says a different year than what you want the money to be applied to, your money will be wrong and you'll be on the phone calling us trying to fix it, okay? Or we'll tell you there's no way of fixing it, and guess what's going to happen? The person's going to have to re-enter it, okay? So always make sure this field here, which you cannot change, this actually reads off of the organizational preferences personal page. So if this is incorrect, you will be wrong as well. Okay, so there's very few key points in the contribution system, but those key points absolutely have to be right every time. Okay, so if I make a batch up and just call it March 31st, I can click this button, and the first time I come in here, it's going to ask me my date for the given. And keep in mind, this is the date that's important, okay, for contribution statements. That date is wrong, I guarantee 100% of the time your contribution statements will be wrong, okay. So this date is what's seen on the IRS statements. Then the rest of this screen has other options that makes the entering of contributions easier for you. So for example, there are some check boxes here. I can clear it after I save. In other words, when I click the save button, it will actually clear all the information, so I have to put in the whole new entry. Okay. I can bypass the currency field as well. So for example, I can bypass this if I'm not interested in that. Some churches don't care about that. I can check mark or uncheck the using check numbers. Some churches don't care to record check numbers, others do. Okay. I can also bypass the fund list, and what that means is every time I click save, it's just going to stay on the same fund each time, especially when I'm doing a whole bunch of general fund contributions. I don't want to click on this box every time and find the general fund. Okay. I want to just bypass that and just stay on the last fund I selected. Okay. So let's go ahead and we'll put a check number in here, and then the envelope number is 1105 for these people, and then I'm going to choose the general fund. Okay. And let's see here. Oh, I have to put an amount in. That's why it's not working. And there's the amount, and I can click Save. You'll notice the Save button actuates when all the required fields are filled in. Okay. I can also put a comment on certain things as well. Okay. Now, notice I do not have the clear after save check, so that means it actually kept the check number, kept the envelope number, and I can actually go through there and I can choose a new check number. So for example, maybe it is a new person, hit enter, and now it's the 996 person, and they gave to the general fund as well. There's another way you can do this as well. If you get some, well actually, let me put check number. And then let me put envelope number, and let's put $100 here. However, instead of saving, I'm going to click the distribute button, and I want to hit a couple funds at the same time. So I can do 50, 25, and 25 for a total of 100. And click save, and that saved all 3 transactions. Okay. Now, there's also an option to do non-cash. And let me talk a little bit about non-cash donations, because a lot of times people are very much confused about non-cash donations. We actually wrote an ebook about contributions. I will point you to that ebook, and I would strongly suggest reading it because there's a lot of stuff on how to record non-cash donations. If you go to our website, IconCMO.com, click on Church Guide, then there's a recording increased donations for church right here. Like I said, there is a lot of information on non-cash donations. But back on the system, you will notice when you do non-cash donations, okay, let's just put an envelope number in here. The amount field is grayed out. You cannot put an amount in, okay? What you are required to do as a church is to put a comment in of what you receive. So for example, someone brings in a box of Xerox paper, okay? You would type that in and click save. Now, some churches will say, why would you not put the amount in? Well, here's the reason. The IRS says no. That's one good reason. The other reason is that person that bought the Xerox paper, what he will do, he or she will do, is they will take the receipt of that Xerox paper and keep it, okay? And they will then attach it to their contribution statement and give it to their CPA, and the CPA and them will determine the fair market value. Now, if they have a receipt, that's the fair market value. But there are other things that do not have an easily attainable fair market value. For example, someone donates a car, okay? Not a new car, a car that's 10 years old. it's very difficult to come up with a fair market value in those circumstances. Many times the donor or the church will hire an appraiser. Appraiser will come out and appraise it at that time. However, the church still will not put a value in. They will put in, if they donated a car, they will put in a 1982 Chevy truck, okay? And what the person will do is take that contribution statement, and then they'll take the appraisal and they'll go to the CPA, and the CPA will determine and either accept the appraisal or not accept the appraisal. It is up to the CPA and the donor. That's pretty much the gist of my conversation here, is that it is up to the CPA and that donor to come up with a fair market value of anything that they donate that is a non-cash thing. The church is not the middleman. In fact, if you put yourself into that position, you can actually have a lot of problems. Okay? So, and if you have any questions on that, you can either read that ebook or, you know, like I said, consult the church's CPA on that. Okay? But on our system, you will only put in a comment and then you'll click Save without a value. Okay? And then I do want to show I got a question in before we leave this screen. How do you do the auto distribute again? If I put in a check number and there's the envelope number and I put in $150, I'm going to click the distribute button. Notice I put the amount here. I'm going to click the distribute button, and now I'm going to come in, and you should be able to see a secondary screen that came up, and I'm going to put in $100 there and $50 there. I can add a comment in here as well. Please send to missionaries, or whatever you want to say there, and click Save. Now, what will happen is I can also print an edit list, and I can see these comments. So if I want to see the comments, I can choose this one and click a print edit list, and you will notice that the general fund accepted all these cash donations, but this non-cash one is 0, but there's a comment here, 1982 Chevy truck. Okay, and then there's also these comments for the ones that I put in. So that's how you would handle a non-cash one, how you would handle multiple distributions as well. We also talked about single distributions, okay, and also these check boxes. Okay, you can also view edit transactions by clicking here. This is also where you will edit transactions if there's a problem with them. So you would actually reverse the batch out, and I'll show you that process. And the batch actually comes into this screen again, and say Sid Adler was actually $35, okay? I can actually change that and click Modify, and now it's $35, okay? And then once I am done editing, I can return to add mode, and that brings my envelope list back in, so I can actually put more donations in, okay? However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually close this batch, and I'm going to go to contributions, and I'm going to actually post this to actually see it, and click begin posting. And when I click begin posting, we have a fund that is incorrect, or actually doesn't have the accounting link on. So let me turn the accounting link on real quick. And now I should be able to post, begin posting. And here is the posting journal. Again, I told you about those posting journals. Here's the 161 for this. The Chevy truck comes on this as well, okay? So there is an audit trail for that, but notice that there is a 0 amount, okay? So that's the posting journal. Now, I want to show the next thing in the guide here. Let me just go through and see. We did the entering the contributions, that's fine. And what I'll do, let me actually reverse a batch out and show you. We'll reverse the same batch out, the 161. And that's under reverse posting. I would choose 161, and all I would do is say something like mistake on donation, something like that. And I want to return the batches of contribution entry. I want to click return batches, say OK. I want to say use original transaction date from my accounting side because I want the money to come in and out on the same day. And now I can go into the enter screen, and there's my batch, March 31st, and enter contributions. And I can add more, or I can actually edit those transactions just like I did before. I can say, you know what, this person actually didn't give $50, they gave $36, and click modify. Okay, and I can close that batch and then repost it. And that's how simple it is to reverse a batch, fix it, and post it again. That literally took me like 25 seconds, if that. Okay. You do get a new journal, just so you know, because they are sequential. Okay, so that was posting and reverse posting, and editing as well, and reverse posting, correct. Now we're going to do the statements. There were some questions on how would certain things show up on a statement. Okay. If we go to the contribution statements, and we're going to look up Sid Adler. Where is he at? Right there. I think he was the one that had the truck. I'm going to make sure include comments is on. I'm also going to put an IRS disclosure at the bottom. Okay. And let's see, what else do I want? That's just show report there. Let's look at that. Where's the general fund? Maybe I didn't do it for Sid Adler. Let me see who I did it for the truck. Here's the posting journal reprint. Oh, it was Logan. Okay, it was Logan. Someone named by the name of Logan. So we'll go to there we go. And if I click show report, here is how the non-cash donations would show up. They gave money to the general fund, but they also gave these 3 items. Okay. Now, what will happen is the CPA will look at this. This is the $185, which is these 2 added together. But the CPA is also going to have to look at this and figure out a value for that. Okay. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Now I want to go back and show the contribution statements in a little bit more detail, because there is 3 statement styles and a few fund types. We actually touched on that earlier, but let me just go over these statements a little bit in detail. The standard statement is the default one, and that actually has all the criteria for the IRS. You would not need any additional information given to the donor. The simple one, again, has all the information, and I'll just show you what that might look like. Let me just refresh the screen so we can kind of look at everybody. If I do simple statement, you'll see that it actually has the given date, the fund, and the amount. What the IRS really wants to see, believe it or not, is this date given and the amount. They could really care less about the funds. But this date is important, okay, and so is the amount. And if they really get detailed, they might want to see check numbers, because the person's going to have to show their check registry, but I highly doubt they even get that detailed. They're really looking for the given date, okay? So the simple and the standard one does what you need it to do, plus it has the address and information and so forth. The other one, the summary, does not, and let me show you what it does. It really only gives 1 page, right, and it just summarizes with a total, okay? This would not fulfill the IRS, and we tell people, you know, this is nice to maybe send out, you know, every quarter or something like that if you like this, to save on paper. Because it is only 1 page. You know, you go down, here's the next page, and so forth. However, for IRS purposes, you want either the standard or the simple. The receipt one is for our Canadian churches. I don't know if they would actually pass for the United States, but these were specifically made for Canadian churches. Okay, so you probably don't want to do that. If you like to test the waters, go ahead, but it's just easier to give what you need, and that's it's said and done. So standard, Statement is the one that most people will pick. You can look up a specific person and do just their statement. There is a lot of options right here, like people have given, and you can actually say over, 250 or 249 or whatever, and that way you only capture those. I kind of recommend it, and kind of against that. It is a nice feature, but I'll be quite honest. If someone still gave $100, if they don't get a statement from you, are they going to give you $100 next year? Probably not, more than likely. So I typically recommend giving giving people a statement, no matter what they gave. And then the date to and from. Then click the lookup button, and you can actually create letters in here. Like I did, I had a pre-formatted letter in here, and that will be attached at the bottom of each statement. Okay. And then what status. And then these other things over here where the yes and no buttons are different options. Like, do you want to print the pledge amount? You may not do pledging, so you don't really care. Okay. You can include the comments. You can include the logo. Print receipt information is, again, for the Canadian churches. Show check numbers and so forth. So those are kind of up to you, and they're pretty self-explanatory. Here's the options that, the reporting options, where you can decide, do you want to print them out and just mail them, or do you want to set up the emailing and do the emailing through the system and email as many as you wish through the emailing portion, and then only do the ones without email and send those through snail mail. Okay. If you do the email, and you will have to go to the email maintenance window and set up people. So for example, Sid Adler is set up, you can see where it says yes, and it's sending to the household. Okay. So you don't want to determine who wants emails for their statements or not. Okay. And then labels, of course, can come out that would match whatever options you choose on the statements or statements without emails. Okay. And that pretty much covers statements. So let's go back to our guide, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's the last part of it. Yes, it is. So in the webinar, we basically went over, let me go to the table of contents, the organizational personal settings, the envelopes, the fund maintenance, the batches, preparing the statements, okay? So those are all the things that we went over. I'm going to go ahead and take care of some questions that came in. If you choose taxable, will it still show on the contribution statements? I did mention that. No, it will not, provided that you don't choose taxable here. Okay, you always want to say tax deductible. But I obviously went into some detail on that and why I probably wouldn't do it through donations. Okay, is there a way to enter pledge contributions unique to the user? That is something that doesn't work out equally by week or month or quarter. Really, the one that I would probably say for that is you would just basically put in a annual or other. And I do know that if you put in an amount here, it's going to be due no matter what day you run it for, but that's really your only best option for that when things don't work out equally. Is just put in an amount and tell them, let the pledger know that, because things don't work out equally. I mean, money, you're trying to get money working out equally across dates. It just doesn't work. Dates are very fluid. 365 days a year is bad enough, but then we have a leap year every 4 years. That obviously throws a wrench in everything. And you have 53 weeks one year, 52 weeks the next year. There's a lot of problems with trying to make things work out right when it comes to dates and calendars. You would think that we would have a better system in the world to deal with, but we just don't. So unfortunately, that's just the way it is. Okay. I showed how the multiple funds worked. Hopefully you caught that. In contributions, is there a way to distribute donations across fiscal years? No, you can't do that. You would want to put in a batch against the one fiscal year, and that kind of goes back to this when you go into the enter screen. Remember I told you there's an envelope year here? There's a reason why you don't want to go across years, okay? Those donations need to stay within that fiscal year so that you can compare General Fund 2015 to General Fund 2016. If you're going across years, you can't go by date range. Okay, a lot of people think you can, but you can't. Okay, the problem with trying to do a date range is many times people will come in and prepay. they'll come in 2015 to prepay for 2016. So how do you treat that? Do you treat it as a 2015 donation or 2016 donation? It's a 2016. Okay, they wanted it applied to the 2016 fund, but the given date when they take credit for it is in 2015. Okay, so that's why you can't go by date range and why you can't split those across fiscal years. Okay, why are non-cash donations in a different font on the contribution statement? Is there a way to change this? I think we did it so it stands out. I agree that it could be probably a little bit bigger. Here's the reasoning why we went smaller. We looked at it and says, you know what, these people could put in a very long comment, okay? Although I put in a short one, the idea of a non-cash donation is many times that people will put in a very long description. We wanted one line per comment so that it would actually go across the whole line and print as much detail as possible. So we wanted to, that's why we went kind of smaller on that. We can take that down as a suggestion and see if there's something that we can do to make it look like the rest of the statement. Let me look here. We have people that send in memorials in memory when we have a death. Yes, okay. They are not members, but we need to capture as contributions. Is there a way to deal with this without adding a household which impacts how we are charged? Unfortunately, no. What you have to provide a contribution statement based on an address, right? If they're going to take credit for it, you need to have an address for IRS purposes, okay? Now, here's what you can do, though. You can add them in as a household, right? You can then do your donation as you normally would, okay? And then you can turn around and archive those households and put them in the archived area, which then would not affect your price, okay? That's probably the best way you can deal with it and still get a donation statement and be compliant with the IRS, okay? And if you, I don't know if you were during the membership webinar that we did the other day, but I went through how you can archive households and so forth. You would want to do that. So after your memorial service and you've done all your donations and you're pretty much sure that they're not coming back, then just go through and archive those people, okay? And you can even add them in as a status code, like instead of active or active member or whatever, add them in as memorial service status code. That way you can find them easily, okay, and make sure you got them all. If you set up an envelope number by household and then individual pledge to contribute individually, how should the envelope number be handled? Okay, it would be nice if you knew ahead of time that they wanted their stuff set up by members. Because if they want to do it individually, what you would do is you would do an edit member numbers, and let's say these two are going to be they're in the same household, I believe. I would basically set those guys up as just separate envelope numbers, and that's how you deal with two individuals. Here's James and Jimmy. They're under the same household, but they have two different envelopes. And really, when you set up envelopes, you should know that before you even set them up, how those people want to give. If they want to give separately, there are people that do that even though they're married, okay? And sometimes it boggles my mind, but I guess there are some tax scenarios there that they make out better tax-wise if they print separate tax statements and they file their taxes separately even though they're married. There are some scenarios that work out better for them, and so you want to get that okay from them and find out if they want to individually file their taxes. If they individually want to file their taxes, this is the best scenario. Set up two member envelopes under the member button. If they're a household, it's under added households, okay? Most of the time, majority of your people will get a better tax break, so to speak, if they file jointly, but of course there are exceptions to that, and only they can tell you that, because you as a church do not know their tax scenario, okay? Especially the people that have a lot of businesses and so forth. You can take a guess at what their tax scenario is, but you know, good luck with that. You probably would not be able to know everything about it. So it's best if they tell you ahead of time, okay? Please review contribution statements for pledges to account for pledge payments made in a different calendar year, i.e. donor made contributions calendar year. Okay, that'll take a little setup work. Let me look here. If you're trying to set up the donor made contributions in calendar 2014 for fiscal year 2015. Okay. So here is the 2014 funds, right? And let's find someone that has a 2014 envelope. That would make things a little bit simpler. So let's look at Randy and Tammy. Actually, let's look at this person, because this person is in both years, I believe. Let me just look here. Yeah, she's in both years. Okay. So here, someone's asking a question. Libby's asking a question about how to make a contribution in calendar year 2014 for a 2015 pledge. What she's asking really is, I want to take money that someone gave me in 2014, but apply it to a 2015 fund. I think that's what I'm reading there. She'll clarify if I'm wrong, but I'll go ahead and go through that scenario because it's an important scenario anyway. So here's the deal. First, I would change my thing in. Actually, no, I'm applying it to 2015, so I'm actually fine. I would stay in 2015, and I'm going to apply the money to General Fund 101. Okay, so I go into Enter Batch, and notice I'm in 2015. I'm going to backdate this to 12/31/2014 because I'm in the 2014 year. We got to pretend here a little bit. And you're going to get this warning here that says that you're out of the date range. Well, that's fine. I actually want the money to go over on the accounting side as of December 31st. Okay, and I might push it to a liability or something, something like that. But no need to go into that detail. So enter donation batch prepays. Okay, I'm going to create that batch. I'm just going to say OK to that. And notice I'm going to be applying this to the 2015 year. Okay, so if I type in 12/31/2014, it's still going to give me a warning, and I'm just going to say OK to that. Okay, and I'm going to put in a check number, envelope number, and it was actually just this person, so I'm going to click on them. I'm going to put $500, and I'm going to put General Fund. General Fund 101, and I'm going to click Save. And let's just say this is the only one. So here we have a 12/31/2014. However, it's being applied to 2015 funds. Okay, right here it says funds available for selection are for 2015. Okay, so I'm going to close this batch. I'm going to post it. And go ahead and post. Okay. Now here's the deal. Here's why that's different than any other batch that I'm going to do, more than likely, is if I go to contribution statements and I run statements for 2015 for what was that person's name? This person here. You're going to see no donations, right? There's nothing there for 2015. However, if I go back to 2014, oops, and click Show Report, here A-bar comes up with $500 for 12/31/2014, but it's going towards the 2015. You see the 2015 right there. Okay, so that is a prepay. Okay, and that's what happens on a lot of churches that take prepays. They'll take them on a typical calendar year, January to December. They typically see them come in December. Okay, kind of the last 2 weeks as people start looking at their taxes, and they're like, oh, I made too much. I need to start knocking it down. So they make a big donation to a church to knock it down. Okay. But what they do is they tell the church, well, since I already paid my pledge for 2014, just apply it to the next year. Okay, and that's totally acceptable on the system. You just got to know how to do it. You got to be in the right fiscal year for your fund list. So what I did was I made sure I was in 2015 because that's the funds that I wanted to apply the money to. But when I actually did the contribution, I applied the money as of a 2014 date. In other words, the given date was 2014, okay, within the batch. Okay. Let's see here. I think I got that one. How is the best way to ask households if they would like their statements emailed to them? Is there a way to do that in the contribution module? There isn't a way to do that in the contribution modules, but I can tell you I can probably do it in the groups module. I would probably send it out to the group members. I would make a group up here, and let's just make a whole new one. Entire congregation. Okay, and I'm going to make a group called all. And then I'm going to basically add all members of everyone. Actually, I don't know how old I got people, so I'm going to go to 110 just to make sure I got everybody. I'm going to add all those people, and then I can actually go into the group email and email them a request for them to send back to me if they want to be emailed their statement. And by doing that, you should be able to get requests. So if you put your from address to the address you want replies to go to, you can then have those replies sent to that email address and then update your email side of it as people respond to you. The other thing I would probably do in there, just to make sure your books are pretty straight, is while you're asking that same question, I would have them also, them and others maybe say, do you wish to have your donations as a household, in other words, your mom and dad, or as do you have other people that need individual statements? And you might want to go through some testing of the verbiage of that, but it might be a good thing to know how people want their statements as well. Okay, but that's how I would probably do it. Okay, how the contribution statement parameters need to be set in order to provide a donor statement for 2015 that includes 2014 contributions for 2015. I'm trying to think what you're asking there. Let me look here. If I go to contribution statements, I can put in any date range I want here. Even if it says 2015, you saw me, I could actually pull 2014 by changing these two parameters to 2014. However, if you, I think, okay, I would actually show total all periods, because that option there will allow you to show all periods. They'll have a breakout of the date range that you put here, and also there'll be one line for each, let me think here, for each fund and how much was given outside of that date range. The reason this person didn't show up yet is because they haven't given anything yet in 2015. So they'd have to give at least once for them to show it up on this option here. Okay. With a 7/1 to 6/30 fiscal year, will the contribution statements for year-end tax reporting 12/31 include pledge amounts for the 2 fiscal years? It'll actually include anything that falls within that calendar year based on this date range. So if you put January 1st, 2015 to 12/31/2015, it will come in there. However, each fund has its own pledging. So you're going to see a general fund for 2014 and a general fund for 2015, okay, with pledging and giving under both, okay? And that's how that works, okay? Because they are actually being pledged against different, the funds are different, money's being applied differently, the pledges are different as well. Even though you and I both know they're all the general fund, and once it goes over the accounting side, we don't care what year it was in. For the contribution statements, you're breaking those out so you can show people how well they're doing per fund, okay? Maybe demonstrate a couple different accounting link scenarios, like how we link a contribution for sanctuary flowers to offset our general fund flower expense account. Okay. Jan, looks like Jan by the name there, is asking how do you set up the accounting links. So for example, if I have a flower fund, okay, it would be tax deductible most likely, okay, and I would click save here. Oh, I already have a flower fund, excuse me. I should have never done that. Okay, I have a flower fund. I'm going to click accounting link here. Here's the thing with flower funds that she's pointing out is typically when people give money for flowers, it's typically for some type of memorial service or something like that. And the church is really, the money's really not even hitting the checkbook. The person's buying something, and the church really needs to show that expense but not hit the checkbook. Well, all your other funds that money comes into, like your general fund, if you look at your accounting link, the general fund comes in, it's going to hit the checkbook and it's going to hit the revenue account. Well, for flowers, it's kind of different because you don't want to hit this checking account. The money was already spent by someone else, okay? So what you'll do in a flower fund scenario is if we do accounting link, you're going to say flower fund on the accounting side, okay? And instead of a checking, or should I say banking, you're going to choose expenses, and you might choose something called the flower expenses. I don't think I have a flower expense over here, but these are all the chart of accounts that are on the accounting side. I'm kind of trying to find maybe a possible flower expense, but I don't see one. So let's just throw it under, oh, right there, art, design, and flower expense. Okay. And then it's still going to come in on a revenue side because that's the other side of the transaction, okay? So the money basically came in revenue and it was expensed out and it did not hit the checkbook, and I would just click save. Now every time money gets posted to that flower fund, it will hit the expense, the revenue, and stay away from the checkbook, okay? And hopefully that explains how that kind of works. There's a couple other things. For example, say you are doing a prepay. Say you were doing a prepay in 2014. Right here, I have a prepay for another year fund. I can actually make that go to a liability account called contribution liability. And those monies would actually go into a liabilities account over on the contribution or over on the accounting side. It would not be able to be spent until the new year. And then what will happen is the treasurer will actually make a journal entry, bring those prepaid donations up to the checkbook. Excuse me, they're in the checkbook already. He would actually realize the revenue at that time. Okay? So those are a couple of the scenarios that you can actually get into on the system. Okay? And let's see, a few other. Will the total pledge amount show or only the 6 months? I believe there's a total at the very bottom. Don't quote me on that, but I do know definitely it'll be for the 6 months, or should I say by fund, for the tax reporting if you're doing a June 30th to a July, or July to June 30th fiscal year. Okay, I'm not sure on if the totals will be at the bottom or not. I'd have to look at that, and it would take a little bit to set up, because this system is not set up on a July to June. It's set up as a January to December one. But feel free to give us a call on that, and we can set up a demo system and kind of work through that with you if you need to. If someone buys the flowers and wants a tax-deductible receipt and has an actual receipt, would you still just enter flowers and let the person in their accountant value the flowers? That's kind of a tough call. I probably would allow the accountant to come up with their own value. They have the receipt. There's really no argument on that. But I would put it as a $0. That way it doesn't even come over. It comes over the accounting side, but it's a zero amount. It doesn't affect anything. So that's the way I would do it. But obviously, like I said, some of these questions, like this one, I would probably pass by a CPA on that and see what they have to say on it, what way they would want to see it, I guess. Okay. Okay. It's 4 o'clock. I just noticed the time. I think I got all the questions so far, but if you have any more, I'm free to stay here. That's fine. but I want to be respectful of your time, and I've gone over the contribution module with you on how to set up a lot of the stuff, how to process the batches and so forth. If you have any questions, our tech support is obviously open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 Central Time, but please give us a call or email us and we'll answer those questions as well. I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and we'll go ahead and get going, okay? Thank you very much.